Here's an idea. There should be more widely understood guidelines regarding spoilers. As television viewing has become gradually more tailored to the schedules of its viewers, thanks to the League of Extraordinary Time-Shifting Technologies, the threat of the spoiler has grown. We don't all watch the same thing at the same time, and by having seen something before your friends have, by knowing what happens in their favorite TV shows before they do, you have effectively weaponized your own existence. Having you around is just, it's dangerous. For some couples, the possession of this knowledge is so egregious that they consider it, I hope not earnestly, a form of adultery. Of course, not everyone takes it that seriously. There are some people who don't mind spoilers, and some other people who even enjoy them. As we mentioned in our Breaking Bad episode, there is a popularly upheld opinion that knowing what happens before it does can actually improve one's experience of narrative. In Sequential Outliers, the role of spoilers in comic book reading, published in the Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics, Dan Hassoun puts this very succinctly when he writes, "Knowing more about the future permits one to bask more reflexively and critically in the present." And that may be true, but even if they are potentially undermining their own enjoyment, it would still be a huge jerk move to ignore the preferences of people who would rather not hear spoilers. Complications arise then when you have to navigate social situations where you have people who know, people who don't know but don't care about finding out, and people who don't know and don't want to know, so just keep your mouth shut. Shh, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd. You can't triple stamp a double stamp.
In an attempt to address these complications, both Entertainment Weekly and College Humor have made their own separate forays into establishing official spoiler rules, but I've never actually encountered their explicit use. Avoiding spoilers and avoiding accidentally spoiling things for other people is more art than science. I think handing rules down from on high is never gonna work. So instead of just standing here and telling you how to navigate a world increasingly beset by spoilers, I'm gonna borrow a page from Anthony Fantano's book and transition to Vidcon, where we'll talk to some friends and maybe try to develop a sense of what people think about spoilers.
You can only experience it once for the first time,
Okay.
right? And so you can watch any show or read a book as many times as possible, but you can never get back your virginity of that experience. I even hate when people say oh, this episode is a good one, because then I'm like, oh,
Really?
now I know you ruined the experience for me.
You're like,
now I'm
going in and I want it.
I'm expecting something special to happen because you didn't say that last week, so something different is happening.
They say people need 3 feet of personal space. There's also 3 feet of spoiler space.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
if you're on a bus or on the subway or on, you're not going to be and at the end of Sixth Sense, and then if you kind of live that, maybe you will be responsible.
You are a good person.
And you're a good
You're
person.
a good person.
Using the term spoiler, that means you're spoiling it for somebody.
The actual word itself
The actual-
it's
yes.
a bad.
It's a bad word because it's not us having conversation about something we have mutually seen.
Yeah.
It is, I am ruining something for you now.
Okay, so let's assume that I am someone who wants to know what happens before I experience it happening.
They don't have that heightened sense of, oh, I'm expecting something. They just want to know.
Yeah.
It's like skipping to the end of a book without reading the first part. You just
Or
go to the end.
knowing what your parents got you for Christmas.
Yes. They just want to know.
My really hated spoilers are ones that are in books, and then there's a TV show or a movie, and all of these really smart people who have read the book are like, hey, this happens, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's fair, because there's another type of media that some people are experiencing for the first time.
If they mention the littlest thing about it, and then I know you'll be like, don't say anything, and you'll try and explain, but they'll be like, but it's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
It's just a funny thing that happens. And then you're like, but that funny thing isn't as funny now.
I used to be one of the anti-spoiler people, but now I have a 3.5-year-old and a day job, and I do YouTube stuff. The experience for me is not about, what happens. So I could know that on in the next season of Game of Thrones, X is going to do X, or this person is going to die, or everyone is going to die, because everyone dies in Game of Thrones at some point, right? Spoiler alert. So for me, it's not that thing happens. It's how all of the artists that are making that thing make it happen. Right. So it's about the makeup artists and the editors and how they shoot it and how the direction and how the actors bring that to life in a way that you can't spoil that.
People have shown in studies that, at least in literary platforms, that people enjoy books and stories more when they have already been spoiled. They have more hedonic enjoyment. but I also feel like we're prediction machines. And when it's spoiled for you in advance, you get to, instead of just like running your prediction machine constantly, you get to be like, oh, it's a story.
I have friends that will not have the conversation with me because they don't like to get spoiled, and therefore they don't even like to spoil things for me.
So you're-
even though they're very aware that I don't care about spoilers, that I'm okay having it spoiled for me.
So then what about like the internet and like sitting in front of Twitter or Tumblr?
If you're gonna be on Twitter or Tumblr, then you should be a spoil person like me.
Okay.
Like, you should enjoy the spoiler.
That Venn diagram of like enjoying spoilers and using social media
yes,
is
are totally
it's just
one
a circle.
Yes, that's because you can't subject yourself to like an outlet for other people to share their love for something and then be like, you spoiled it for me. It's like, it's not my responsibility to spoil it or not for you. It's your responsibility to protect yourself if you don't. Like,
So
you
the
know,
whole onus is
use
on-
an internet prophylactic if you need that.
People have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that they don't see them. So when, say, there's an episode of something coming out that I haven't read the book of or whatever, I get off Twitter.
I try to prevent that for other people.
Okay.
So when people are like, Orange is the new Black season 2, we just had this conversation downstairs about it, and then they started talking about the ending, and I was like, hold up. Spoilers? Has everybody seen it? And it turns
so like
out
you have to like you sort of lay down, we
Yeah.
have to go to step 0
Right.
and establish an understanding of everyone's spoiler state.
right. You have to assess the people around you, and there are people that don't want to be disruptive in a conversation.
So they're not gonna be like, excuse me, everybody,
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
interested, or you please shush.
Right.
I don't want to know anything.
Okay.
About anything. Ever. Just, I want to
Just blinders
blindly
on and-
go through the world and assume that things are happening.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that is exciting. Now, where do I walk off to?
Just-
oh, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so now that we're armed with some ideas from our very awesome and talented friends, we will transition back to New York. Man, I could really get used to this method of travel and see if we can't synthesize us some spoiler lessons. First, spoiling things is serious business. Jake, Mitch, and Greg all talked about the importance of that first experience, but then Bobby talked about how his friends won't spoil things for him even when he asks, because to them it feels wrong. For people who enjoy spoilers, which remember should maybe be everybody, sometimes asking their friends to spoil stuff for them is like asking them to act against some moral code. I think this is a good place for one of Leslie's ideas, that you should know where your friends are in the progression of a piece of media so that you don't accidentally spoil something for them, but you should also know where they lie on the Mitch and Greg to Emily continuum, from don't tell me anything, nothing at all, to tell me all of the things all of the time and tell me loudly, shout it from the rooftops. As far as public places go, I'm with Mitch and Greg that the existence of some kind of spoiler-free zone seems courteous, especially where it's impossible for you to know the spoiler status of everyone within earshot. But when talking privately with friends, it's gonna get more complicated. Because situations where your friends want to talk excitedly about a thing that you don't want to know anything about present a choice. Fun conversation with friends, or unspoiled media experience. This can become very complicated, especially in situations like what Vanessa describes with Game of Thrones, which has existed as a book for much longer than it has as a TV show. But I'm gonna say that in this situation, you should always side with friends. And friends, you should ask before spoiling something, ideally if someone wants to avoid spoilers that is worthy of respect. But in this particular situation, conversation, chums, excitement, I think things are worth being spoiled. If the spoilee so chooses, which I think they should. You can do so knowing, as Emily said, that science is on your side, but I also think that learning spoilers from your excited friends can be just as much of a thrilling reveal as first-hand media experience, unless your friends are terrible storytellers, in which case, yeah, that's a real risk that you run. Our ideas of how spoilers should be handled are at least partially informed by a sense of maintaining social order. The popular conception is that spoilers are a bad thing to be avoided, when really they are a choice to be made by individuals. Basically, whether potentially spoiling things for other people or choosing to have things spoiled for yourself, allies before epiphanies. Or, chums before stuns. Pals before portents. Which maybe goes without saying? Perhaps I'm just hoping that this video will behave something like that sign on the bus in that one episode of The Simpsons, and that the world's spoilery situations will become slightly easier to navigate given its existence. Or maybe we should just make a sign to hang above water coolers. Which would not work on the internet, but we all seem to agree that avoiding spoilers on the internet is a losing battle, so good luck. Snape kills Dumbledore. What do you guys think? What are the spoiler rules? And do you enjoy spoilers? Let us know in the comments. And a spoiler alert, I ask people to subscribe at the end of every video. I hear that you will now enjoy every Idea Channel episode a little bit more knowing that. Maybe the secret to feeling empathy for robots is to cover them in a fine layer of fur and then feed them pellets of some kind on the same time every day. Let's see what you guys had to say about the well-being of robots. So first things first, the man himself, David J. Gunkel, the author of The Machine Question, commented on our video, so that is very exciting. He said that there is an additional complication in that it seems like in order for something to become a moral patient, we have to consider it a kind of person, that we need to extend the idea of what counts as person, and that we are doing that in lots of different ways, but we have to be prepared to accept the effects or ramifications of that, and are we? So yeah, I mean, a whole other episode probably. I mean, huge question. So thanks, David. Lots of people in the comments were saying that they do in fact mourn for their computers or phones or technology when they break or when they start to malfunction. And I'm sure that you become very sad and distressed, but honestly, I doubt that you mourn. I really doubt that you actually have a grieving process. I understand that you're sad, I'm not trying to minimize your sadness, but I don't think that you are as sad as when, say, a person dies. But that being said, Joe Hanson from It's Okay to Be Smart leaves a very convincing comment about the fact that insofar as any piece of technology is an extension of the body, or in extreme cases, maybe the mind, it does seem like it is worthy of moral consideration, that we do give it that moral consideration. So this is a really great comment. Links to this one and all the others in the doobly-doo. Henry Krider and Aaron Rafferty say that we'll probably never feel a kind of real moral consideration for technology because it's mass-produced, that these things are not in themselves unique, and that, when your computer breaks, you can go and buy a new computer, but, you can't and probably wouldn't want to go and buy a new grandma. Buddhist Potato says that we will start to have a moral concern for technology when our relationship with it progresses beyond that of productivity or entertainment. But then Sarah Witt has a really interesting point of view on this same idea and says that there are things we do have a kind of relationship with, specifically she talks about Twitter feeds, where we assume they're people even though they're not, and that we might be actively looking for something that's not there. So, it's a question of when that change happens, and is it something that we are going to design or something that is going to happen to us? Nick Picard writes a really insightful comment and says that if consciousness is something of a continuum, right, with ants being on one end and people being on the other end, that as machines exhibit something closer to the human end of the consciousness continuum, we will begin to treat them with more moral concern. I think, that's absolutely. But then, right, we get into the bigger question of what even is consciousness? But this is nice. I like the consciousness continuum. I Am Noir sets up 3 situations, or really asks 3 questions that frame the idea of robo-ethics, and says that we will treat machines a certain way when they can make judgment calls, when they can feel pain, and when their data, right, is completely lost when they die, right? And so this, I think, raises the question of would we ever actually design a piece of technology where those 3 things are possible? Would we design something to feel pain? I don't know. Luna Starwin, Jessica Ruiz, and a couple other people brought up the movie Her. So, funnily enough, when I was first thinking about this episode, I thought that it would maybe be about the movie Her, and then I decided to zoom out. But yeah, I think that it's such a great example of our concern, not only for technology, but a completely disembodied voice. I mean, right, disembodied Scarlett Johansson voice, so there is maybe a visual. Anyways, Mark, that's another thing for another day. But yes, I think Her is a great example of a lot of these ideas. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these exceptionally human persons. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit. The links are, you guessed it, in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from the Pip Squeaks, who points us towards a very funny article that asks, who won the World Cup of arm folding? I'm so glad that this got turned into a set of animated GIFs. And for this week's record swap, we will be replacing Panda Bear's person pitch with Negativland's Escape from Noise. So many structural integrity problems. All right, so adios, Panda Bear, and welcome, Negativland.